Greetings, my friend. Welcome to the Secret Shop.
Hello and welcome to the Secret Shop podcast. I'm your host Cymen, and with me as always is Anga. What's up, Anga?
What's popping? And not much. What about you?
I'm doing just fine, thank you so much. Kiwi, what about you?
Great as usual.
Nice. And as our video viewers might have noticed, we have a special guest this week, and it's Swim. Hello, Swim.
Hello.
Hello. It's nice to have you, a longtime friend of the podcast, finally back for more.
Yeah, it's been a while. God, wow, that would have been like almost 2 years then, closer to 2 years than a year, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Right, that's crazy.
Oh yeah, the game released in 2018, didn't it? Oof.
Oh yeah. Oh.
How time flies. So, have you been keeping up at all, Swim? This is a
Nope.
Artifact 2.0 podcast. You did not. Wow. We're going to turn this into a gimmick, everyone.
Yeah, I haven't so much. I'm gonna need you guys to kind of like fill me in a little bit. I will. I'm interested in trying out the game, but I haven't gotten a key yet, so it's only so much I can
Exactly. Because Valve is trying to avoid the, elite club kind of feeling that last beta seemed to have for most people. No more dancing monkeys. So what we're going to do this week is we're going to play a little game, which is called Swim's Hot Takes. We're going to throw some facts at Swim about Artifact 2.0, and he's going to tell us all about his feelings that are just going to come bubbling up from it.
Okay, so we're doing like a design standpoint thing?
Yeah, whatever comes to mind, honestly.
They were doing it all in one go to overwhelm you as much as possible.
And I think I'm just gonna make the start. Now there's no more lane progression in Artifact 2.0. So the rounds do no longer go from lane 1 to 2 to 3 with initiative and so on. Now the entire board is unlocked for play, so you can play your cards in any of the lanes as long as you have the mana. Which, by the way, there's no longer separate mana pools for each lane. There's now only a single mana pool. Go.
Yeah, no, that is one that I heard about. I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it, but I guess it's gonna be like the biggest change. It's really hard to say. That's such a broad one. I can't say whether I like it or not necessarily. It makes it kind of like, it takes away from what the original Artifact was a bit, for better and for worse. It's like less sort of chess-like, less like super plan ahead, super heady, but obviously a lot of people thought it was kind of too far in that direction. So it ends up being sort of a bit more, I guess, diluted. Probably less like super exhausting because of that.
I think one of the most immediate things is that results to your plays are much more immediate, basically.
Yeah.
Like you no longer have to wait throughout the entire turn to see what happens. And it was really hard in Artifact 1.0 to differentiate between a good play and a great play.
Right. No, it's really, really obtuse as a game, especially because and I remember there was like a Reynad video where he kind of talked about this, especially because for sometimes you want your heroes to die, and that's not even necessarily a good thing because it just creates a ton of confusion for the player, which is like, did I make the right play or not? Or when they lost, they're like, what should I have done differently? And unless you're really, really, really thinking about it, you kind of had no idea. You didn't have direction as a player, which lost a lot of people.
Yeah.
Something that they added that will help with this is replays. They've got replays up in the client already, which is pretty exciting. But yeah, that was something we touched on, that it was very difficult to see what were good and what were bad plays. And later on, you do many play styles that were super unintuitive, as you mentioned, like killing your heroes on purpose.
Okay, so a lot of people are mad that you now only draw one card per round, but I think that's perfectly balanced considering there's only one mana pool. What do you think about the new card draw?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it sort of reminds me, and again, I haven't seen this. This is not like, I don't want to get quoted as saying things. I know that's kind of the whole point of this podcast. You're trying to trap me in, and then there'll be like Reddit posts. Oh, Swim said so and so. Oh, he's fucking, it's like, can I say those kinds of words?
Those are still popping up. Those are still popping up after a year.
You've been gone for a year. You're irrelevant at this point. Don't worry
Thank
about it.
fucking God. I'm so
That is
glad.
not true. There was a post just today.
Oh no.
What did I say
Yeah.
this time?
No, don't worry about it. It's just like some.
Why
it's
would you
just
say?
some-
You can't just say that and then say don't.
All
worry
right
about
then.
it.
It was some revisionist history about how you turned from a total yes man to one of the harshest critics of the game, and then just turned tail, obviously, to some other game to destroy.
Yeah, that sounds right. I don't know. I mean, a lot of people. I expect a lot of people are like kind of wondering like where, because I said I would check back on the new artifacts, and a lot of people are probably wondering like where I've been, and I just don't have a key. Same reason most people
Right.
aren't playing.
And you were actually, just to correct the record, so to say, you were actually one of the earliest critics of the original artifact, like even during the beta. I remember you literally saying that the game just has very strong fundamentals and good mechanics, but, and I quote, I remember this, they cannot release like this.
Yeah. No, it was kind of like a weird situation. I did have kind of like I would say faith in Valve, like, you know, playing in the beta, I was like optimistic for the game. And I will say, like, in the future, you know, looking back, that was a mistake on my part. I shouldn't really have been optimistic. I feel like I did kind of like I was a little too like, because I've been playing Valve games for a really, really long time, right? And I do think I definitely had kind of like an overall, oh yeah, I'm sure they're gonna fix it. But I mean, I never ignored any like problems that the game had.
Exactly. What did you think about the way that deployment worked in Artifact 1.0? Because I feel like deployment was one of those secret skills in the game, which made a lot of people overly reliant on stuff like teleport scrolls, if you remember how that worked.
Yeah, deployment is really interesting. I mean, I like the idea of like deploying to lanes. There's a little bit of a rock paper scissors element, which I think a lot of people didn't like that particular part. The biggest thing people didn't like about deployment was the positioning aspect of it, like not lanes, but in terms of like the fact that you couldn't control where in the lane your unit went. I think people hated that. How does the new deployment work?
Oh, good that you asked. Kiwi, would you like to get into it perhaps?
Oh, I would love to. So the downside is we've lost infinite lane size. The upside is you get to choose precisely where your units go, and arrows are gone for the most part. So there's 5 slots in each lane. You take turns deploying one at a time. So you both place a hero in the middle lane. You can place in spots 2, 3, or 4 on the first round. And so you both blind place in the middle lane. And then you each play in your off lane. So one person places in first and the other places in last lane. And then you swap and you see where your opponent played, so you can counter their deployment and you can put your safe lane where you want.
That's very interesting.
This is specifically about the first 3 heroes that you deploy in the first round.
Yeah.
And after that, you can place them wherever you want in any of the 15 slots. And if you place over top of a hero, you'll bounce your hero back. So it will put it back in the fountain. And if you place over a creep, the creep gets destroyed. The one concern we had initially was that there would be like a dire and a radiant advantage, like whoever had first lane versus last lane. But combat resolves from left to right and then right to left, alternating.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, okay.
Which
so it ends up being
does
balanced.
interesting things too.
Yeah, so overall, it seems like the game has become more... What's the best way to put it? It seems like Artifact, like the original Artifact, did a ton of like really kind of, I'm going to say bold decisions in a lot of ways. And some of them I kind of outright disagree with, and, you know, a lot of people do. Like, I'm not really talking about stuff like economy even, really. Sorry, there's sirens in the background. I'm talking more about like the design decisions, which were really, really complex and really unique. And I liked a lot of those aspects, and I know you guys did too, but there was also a large part of the reason why the game was so, I guess, inaccessible, right? Because as much as we can blame the economy, and the economy is, yeah, probably the single biggest thing, a lot of people weren't fans of like the overall gameplay as a whole. I guess they've made it more accessible. I do wonder if that might lose a lot of kind of the people that have fallen in love with the original version, which, you know,
Right.
the real long haulers, as it were.
Yeah.
We kind of felt that way too, that it would look like each post we saw, these are like things we felt were integral to Artifact, like arrows and infinite lanes and infinite hand sizes and stuff. And so far, it's still like, obviously we can't play and you don't know how you feel about a game until you've played it for a while. But so far, it still looks like it feels like Artifact, even though so many of these things that we felt were integral have changed.
Yeah. Something else about deployment is actually that there's now a melee creep coming into every lane, every round in the leftmost spot. So it is completely predictable now and consistent. Speaking of hand sizes, Anger, have you actually seen what they did with hand sizes and what happens when you get more over the limit?
No.
I believe they have limited hand size to 10. Is that correct, Kiwi?
Yeah, including items.
Including item cards. And everything over that becomes this overdraw stack, correct?
Yeah, that you cannot see currently.
Right. You cannot currently see it. I'm sure that they'll change that, though.
That may shift, yeah.
What's
So how does that
overdraw
work?
stack?
So it's cards that you've drawn, but you don't have access to them. And so say you have 10 cards, when you use one, the top card from your overdraw stack will go into your hand immediately.
Yeah.
Okay.
We haven't seen it be very relevant yet with just one card a turn. One aspect of them scaling the mana to one lane or to whatever, to one mana pool, is that a lot of the lower cards got their mana scaled down or their strength scaled up. And then the top end of stuff was also nerfed as well, so the pacing is a little bit different. It doesn't look like there's many times where you're in positions of having as many cards, unless you specifically put that in, and there are lots of tools to put lots of card draw in.
Yeah, Kiwi, you were mentioning right before we started recording, you mentioned that things got like downscaled a bit, just like numbers across the board.
So in general, all the stats are about 60% of what they were.
Yeah.
Creeps were scaled to 1/1s, which seems very odd initially when you hear it, but lots of heroes interact with them, and so they're not as significant later on in the game, and so you're often replacing over that spot, and heroes such as Kana and Prelix interact with the creeps a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
Have they talked about why exactly they like downscaled the numbers?
Something to do with balancing and simplicity, and they're trying to, as you said, make it more accessible, so they've taken the math aspect out of many parts of it.
Yeah.
Another way they did this was with armor. So armor was a nightmare for math, even if you're good at math in Artifact 1. And it also made really difficult balance things. And so they've changed armor now to just be kind of like shields, I guess. It has 3 armor will block 3 damage in a turn. Or -1 armor will add 1 damage in a turn. But if you have 5 sources, it still only does it once.
But it replenishes every turn.
Yes. And so it makes the math side much easier, but it also makes balancing things much easier. Like 2 armor in Artifact is just stupid. It ruins any upkeep deck that exists or things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm a little like hesitant about like the idea of downscaling in general. I've actually seen a lot of different games try this approach. Probably the biggest of which being Gwent, which had kind of like a bad time with it. In general, it can be a good thing to have more granularity of balance, like more like tweakability with like slightly larger numbers. It's interesting to see how it'll work out.
They actually did this with mana as well, in a way, or rather with spell costs, because they have overall reduced the cost of low and mid-range spells. They kept high-cost spells at a high cost, but honestly, even the impact of those has been lessened a lot. So there's no longer these game-ending finisher spells, so to say. It's much more about slinging lower and mid-range mana spells at each other to alter the battlefield, and then just as soon as both players pass, combat will commence in all lanes. Either from left to right or from right to left.
The top end still exists, but it's less oppressive, I guess. And the fact that you have 1 mana pool playing a bolt on 10 is going to be a terrible decision every time, just as playing TOT in lane 1 could be bad against Aurora and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it's gonna be a really, really different game. It's so hard to evaluate any of these decisions in a vacuum, right? All you can do is kind of have takes, predictions about how things will end up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a shame none of us actually have the game.
Yeah, I know, right? Just talking out of our asses.
Right.
However, something that they did is take a look at heroes again.
Mm-hmm.
Because heroes were like the central pieces to your deck, but a lot of them just felt really boring. They were just a pile of stats, basically, and some of them even had like this shitty spell that you now had to include 3 of in your deck. And what they want to do now, and what they've done so far, is make heroes just way more interesting. First of all of them now get at least 1 ability. Some of them even get 2.
But in general, if they have multiple, then their passives beyond the first one, usually.
Mm-hmm. They have to redesign all heroes in a way that they synergize way more with their own signature card. You can still use other heroes to cast their signature cards, but most heroes are designed in a way that they get a little bit more value out of their own signature card, especially combined with their ability.
That seems really promising.
Yeah.
Do you have an example?
For sure. We're
Keith or Axe.
Yeah, I was thinking of Keith too.
Go ahead.
Keith used to have no ability at all, and he was just a big, slightly weaker axe, and his signature card just boosted stats. He's still very, very tanky, but his signature card is Reckless Charge. It makes him swap. The caster swaps with a neighboring position, and it taunts. And it's Quick Cast, which used to be called Get Initiative. So it's a get Initiative spell. And then his ability, his active ability, makes each unit pointing at Keith, they battle themselves. So it's kind of like Berserker's Call, but not really, because they battle themselves.
Huh.
So they're still keeping like the flavor of the heroes. Like he's still a big bulky boy, but they also make sure that the signature cards are actually things you want to draw. You don't ever want to get the old Keith card on your hand, but now like it's actually something good that you can actually find useful, and it synergizes with his ability.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I was just going to say initiative exists still, but it's a lot less relevant. And so a lot of the initiative cards are for combos. Like this one, for example, he does the taunt and then he makes them punch themselves. Or lots of them will be like Rubik has spell steal, spell copy, and then use the spell sort of thing. And so many of them are used that way, but also they have the flexibility of being used purely for initiative.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I like this direction of kind of like empowering heroes or empowering their synergies. I think in design, there's a very common thing that'll happen, which is like players might misattribute one flaw with another. Basically, like whenever players are kind of like not having fun, it's always a sign that there's a problem, but it's not necessarily an indication towards the solution. And I think like one of the most common ways that manifested in the original artifact, I would say the single biggest thing that I didn't really hear a lot of people talk about was that all of the heroes were really low synergy, and not just the heroes, but the general playstyles in general. And that was actually what made Artifact such a good draft game. That was why it was so good with draft, because it was such low synergy. It was just kind of like value exchanges, very heady, very plenty. And every time you look at draft packs, you don't see any of these synergy cards that you have to ignore. Right. But at the same time, this was its biggest detriment in constructed. And the biggest ways this manifests are like balanceability being the biggest one. When there's not as much synergy or like combo play, there is always going to be like really, 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 really major balance flaws. The reason for that is just because like no matter how close things are to being balanced together, if there's not divergent gameplay and divergent deck building, there will always be one best thing, right? Like, for example, when they nerfed Axe in the one balance patch they had, and
X-Coin or no.
Yeah, exactly. Like when they nerfed Axe, and he's still very good, right? It's basically there's a difference between balanced and balanceable. And it's most important that a game exists in a way that's balanceable. And to have that in constructed, you need some amount of like synergy or combo ability. And so I like that they're adding it in here. No, I haven't seen all these cards, but that's definitely a direction I support very much.
In general, all the heroes are a lot stronger, or more useful. Like, nobody looks useless. Every hero that we saw revealed was like, oh, that looks really strong in comparison to 1.0, but they've kind of just upscaled the strength of everything.
Yeah.
Everything's a lot more stronger and more interesting.
But while also reducing stats. That's what I think is the best part, that they reduced the stats but still made them look stronger. So it's more about, using the abilities and cards rather than just beefing up the heroes.
I think it's worth talking about Axe in connection to this whole combo talk, because his signature card is now Culling Blade for 2 mana. And when he slays a damaged enemy hero with 3 or less health, the spell becomes repeatable this round. So you basically get a fleeting copy of this spell in your hand, meaning it disappears after the round ends.
That's pretty cool.
Speaking of all this draft stuff, they have actually in Artifact 2.0 in the beta introduced a new mode to the game, which is called Hero Draft. Kiwi, would you like to get into how Hero Draft works?
So Hero Draft is the first game mode that they're testing at the moment. It's pretty straightforward. You draft heroes back and forth from a shared pool. There's one of each color. Every 2 picks, it'll refresh the packs, and you pick back and forth like 2 at a time, alternating. So you draft 6 heroes each, and then it'll fill the rest of your deck with matching cards, such as random 2 color used to do. And so it's like an introduction to drafting and an introduction to deck building a little bit for newer players, to get people into the game, maybe.
Yeah, it's meant as a tool to allow people to learn the cards without having to like dive into how to construct a deck or get lost in draft where they don't know the value of cards.
Cards are also arranged by tiers of complexity, I guess. And so it looks like all the cards are going to be released for free or under the price of the whole game. And you unlock higher cards as you play more. So initially, people only have access to, say, a half or a third of the collection. And then it goes up as they play a little bit more and get more comfortable. And so cards that are less intuitive or more complex get added to their pool of cards they can play later on. However, experienced people that join the game can jump right into Constructed right away, I believe, and tournaments, from what we've been told.
No, that makes sense. That's one of the bigger points of criticism was just kind of like throwing you into the deep end, right? A lot of I mean, it as far as games go, people really had a problem with like the new player experience, which they touched on in a lot of different ways. It's not just because honestly everything about Artifact's old new player experience was bad, and I did overall like a lot of like the uniqueness that old Artifact had. It was a cool game. It did things different, and I'll always respect that. But if the new player experience is okay, I just paid $20 for this game. I bought a few packs, whatever. They want me to buy more tickets, whatever. That's economy stuff, but it's part of it. The tutorial is, I guess, like it was definitely a little lighter than it could have been, and it just like it very much throws you in. It doesn't really guide you. And one of the big things about new player experience in card games as well is like a lot of the design of cards is as like kind of like learning helpers, like which I think people don't think about a lot, but there wasn't really a lot of that in Artifact either. So it seems like they're going really hard on this, like completely overhauling the new player experience.
Speaking of which, there is now a single player campaign. There's going to be a story in Artifact. There's going to be a linear progression of missions with heroes and units unique to the story mode, which doubles up as kind of a tutorial.
Yeah, that sounds perfect. That's exactly the kind of thing that makes a lot of sense that they're going in that direction. Are we gonna say, Kiwi?
I was just gonna say, like, I completely agree that the new player experience was terribly off-putting, and so many people left the game before they played enough to get into it, and that was
Right.
scaring their player base off before it started was part of what led to the community being so toxic and negative right off the bat.
Actually, and like, I trust me, I'm not just like bashing the game. Like I said, I like many things about the game. Artifact, it's a complicated game. It was a complicated relationship. It's hard not to think back on it fondly. I actually can't think OG Artifact. I can't think of a game that has a worse new player experience than that. It's like on every level. Oh yeah,
Dota?
what's worse?
Dota?
Oh, Dota's pretty bad, but that's just kind of like that's a lot of the genre in general. Like MOBAs are just like not new player friendly. But that's true. That's true. I think they've added a lot to that these days. But I remember getting into Dota and it was kind of a nightmare overall. But yeah,
Took me
just
100
stuff like
games to learn how to do the courier.
Yeah.
I remember getting so angry sitting as broodmother under the enemy tower, wondering why they could see me.
Oh my god, I can just imagine. Something else that was a huge point of criticism in the original Artifact was the shop and the secret shop. Do you remember much of that? Does that spark any joy in you?
Ooh, yeah. I remember losing to Petrify because he got a Vesture of the Tyrant off the secret shop. Yeah, I lost in the Sea Story Cup. That's what comes to mind when you say secret shop.
So this one does not spark joy.
Yeah, correct.
Well, you'll be pleased to hear that they have totally revamped the shop as well. The 3 slots are now basically equal, though I've heard that there's some hidden mechanics to it, but those haven't been quite confirmed yet. So there's still 3 slots. There's no more consumables. There's no more dedicated item deck or secret shop slots. They are all equal. And there are now shop levels. So they actually took a good look at Underlords and Auto Battlers, and they have added a level up function and upgrade button where you have to upgrade the shop to get to higher tier items. And there used to be a reroll button until people complained so much that it was removed within a week. And you can either buy a card or more, you can upgrade, or you can earn some extra gold, and that will close the shop, and that's your decision for the shopping phase, so to say. Either you spend gold or you get gold.
Your item deck is made up of 10 cards you put in and 11 currently of random ones, like such as secret shop items, and all 3 slots are split between those randomly. Items are changed. All the prices are 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So there's 5 tiers. And so when your shop is level 1, you can only get the 10 gold items. If you didn't put 10 gold items in, the secret shop will have put some in for you. And items in general are much less stats now and much more utility. And so you're trying to find utility with what you're offered, or if your item deck didn't supply everything, it's kind of like, yeah, the secret shop gives you a vesture, but much more low key, like more situational and less win the game because you got lucky sort of thing. And to top this off, both people's item decks are completely visible in the shown deck list. So you know from the game start what items were put in each person's list.
Huh. Okay, that last bit is pretty interesting. Yeah, so I can say for sure, this is definitely a big step in the right direction. I would really have to play around with it to know like exactly how much I liked their eventual goal. But one of the points of feedback I gave them, God, this was literally over 2 years ago. Oh man,
Here we go.
How
Spill
does
the
2
tea.
years go that fast?
I know, right? Spill the tea. Give us what you told them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I gave them a lot of feedback early on. One of the big ones, I remember I wrote like a long email about specifically like the item shop.
Yeah.
And how it felt like
you showed that one on stream back then, I believe.
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah. I think I did show that one. But yeah, basically the item shop felt weird. I won't exaggerate on when I say everything about how the item shop worked was probably from a design standpoint my least favorite thing about the original Artifact, which probably is a hot take because I don't think I've heard anyone else say that. And don't get me wrong, I wouldn't say it's the biggest problem that the original artifact had, because I don't think it was very high impact at the end of the day. But I don't think I liked any of the individual decisions that were put into the like item shop design. Like a lot of things in that just made no sense. Because yeah, I mean the biggest thing, like Kiwi touched on, all the items were just like kind of like plus or minus stats, right? The like all the decks kind of wanted to run, you know, Blink Dagger and you know, what was it? God,
Cheap
it's been too long. Stonehall Cloak, yeah, cheap cloaks. It's just like cheap health items. Kind of nothing else mattered, right? It was a really, really weird system. So yeah, I mean, I'm very, very, very much all for like, you know, plus synergy. You're saying it's like 50% your cards and 50% random. I'll have to play around with it to see how I feel about that.
Because there's 3 slots, you're actually getting your cards more consistently.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And because of how the tiers are, then you get them when you want them a little bit. Like when you unlock tier 3, then you have all the tier 1, 2, and 3 into your shop. But early on, you're not ever going to get blocked by a horn or something. So you consistently get your lower items more when you need them.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely sounds good. One thing I'm very curious about is like how much synergy there is in terms of this, because you were saying items are more situational, and you know, you as a player have a bit more choices when you're in your deck builder looking for items. Are there specific items that are much more so like, you know, oh, this is big for this kind of strategy, or this is big for this kind of strategy?
We don't really know yet, honestly. Like none of us have a good feel for the shop. Watching it. Watch some people play econ decks and they get to their tier 5 items and they buy their endgame items that look really fucking strong. And it looks like you can do that consistently. I don't know. To me, it looks like the shop in general is a lot more consistent and you have more control over it. And I really like the sort of like the random 2-color feel of you got some items, how can you use them to the best of their ability? Or having answers there. It kind of fills in the role of having a sideboard in a more casual way sort of thing, but it's not the imbalanced luck because they're visible to everybody.
That makes sense.
But they took out, the downside is they kind of took out the counting of how much gold your opponent had spent, and so like knowing what they have, because everything is in increments of 5. So that's the downside to it. But
I don't think
more
that's much
accessible.
of a downside.
It's more accessible. It's downside on the top end of play, or to some of those players maybe.
Something they also changed is there are no more free actions. Now basically everything costs at least 1 mana, which includes equipping items. You may remember that way back when players would actually, when they were playing this game of chicken, where they just started playing items and replacing items just to make the other player finally play a spell so they could respond to it. That is no longer really possible because every equip action will take at least 1 mana.
Except the first one. Currently there's a courier item, but it's probably just going to be built in that your first item equip every round is free. But so every action also takes mana, like say using a Keenfolk Musket or Horn of the Alpha, they all cost 1 mana. Or every ability costs 1 mana as well. Or every turret costs 1 mana. So
That's
you can't delay turns and not progress them.
Yeah, but it makes sense. God, it's so hard. You know, all 4 of us, we haven't played the game. We're trying to talk about it. We're trying to kind of like pretend like we even really have the ability to talk about it.
Don't do this. Don't pull back the veil.
No,
the listeners
they
will
deserve to
find
know.
out. The listeners find out they can't learn anything from us.
They expect us to be experts and tell them what's good, and we have no clue.
Yeah.
But really, we're speculating on a high level for sure. Is there anything else from Artifact 2.0 that is worth tossing at Swim? Otherwise, we could talk about all the new keywords that were introduced.
Monetization. By the sounds of it, they're just planning to have battle passes and hats. As far as we know, maybe there's a price tag to enter the game, but they're not selling cards this time around.
Yeah, I think that
which was an issue.
Valve is, with this project, with Artifact 2.0, they are going like full 180 on basically every aspect, right? You know, monetization being the biggest one. They're going
What is going
Sorry.
on?
There's-
Is this
Have you
a
not
riot or
seen the
something?
news?
Yeah.
America is going down.
Right.
Oh, is it
I'm in the
really
middle
like
of it.
that up close outside everybody's windows?
Yeah. This is what it's like
What?
living here, Anger.
See, that is the
Right.
push, Siren. Haven't you seen the movie?
Oh yeah, it's terrible. I can't even go outside. It's too dangerous. Anyway,
That's necessary.
this artifact podcast.
Why are you not out rioting? ACAB, ACAB!
Okay.
Stay inside, everyone.
Yeah, I was saying Valve is going super 180 on like kind of all on kind of all these big decisions.
We're keeping this in. We're keeping this in. This is
The
gold.
state of the world right now. That's why I was late today. I was watching the protests too much.
The riots even follow us into the podcasts.
Jesus.
God.
Riots in the streets, a deadly virus. The hell is going on?
What a year.
All right. So Valve was doing like a full 180 on everything, right? You know, economy. Artifact was panned as like one of the most like unreasonable economies that any card game has ever had, and that's saying something because it's card games. And then now they've kind of pulled a full 180, and they're going like very, very, very economy friendly, right? They they were saying, a lot of people were saying, oh, it's too bad new player experience, too like nuanced, too kind of like heady of a game, like it's left you feeling exhausted and not sure exactly what you did wrong necessarily. And they've kind of like dialed that back down a bit. I don't have any concerns overall, given like all of these changes, that it's going to be the way it was before. If anything, my biggest concerns are that in some areas they might have went too far the other direction.
Right.
Like what?
Well, again, I'm saying this from the point of
Hot
concerns.
takes.
No. These aren't takes. These are like zero information. I'm talking out of my ass. I'm just giving my impression out of my personal concerns, given my very limited perspective, which are stuff like, for example, the game might be a little too there definitely might be a little too much agency over certain things. And again, this is just based on stuff that people have said, but in card games, whenever you tend to dial back RNG in a lot of areas and give players too much control, which is, by popular request, happens all the time, and kind of every game has actually had times where it's done this, and it can work out, but it can also lead to situations where some amounts of like remaining RNG become too. It can lead to very, very like uniform metas or sort of play patterns in a game, because any sort of like remaining amount of RNG left can be very accentuated. You can end up with like very big balance issues with that kind of thing. And also on top of that, it's possible that it might feel it might feel a little diluted, I guess, compared to like old artifacts. Again, these are concerns. I think concern is a decent word for it, because it implies that, I mean, they're not really coming from anywhere. They're not informed per se. They're just like looking at what I see. These are some things that might concern me. I'll still play it, and hopefully I'll be wrong. I'd love to be wrong.
You can put up as big a disclaimer as you want. People are still gonna write fanfics about you on the subreddit.
Oh, I know.
You can't stop it.
I really don't understand that sort of obsession. I suppose it is.
People love fanfiction, man.
Yeah, the Artifact subreddit is literally the biggest fucking fanfiction subreddit. It's all just fanfiction.
Something else that we can talk about is actually all the new keywords that have been introduced to Artifact 2.0. Perhaps not all of them, because most of them are actually quite self-explanatory, but there's a couple that are quite interesting. Kiwi, are any sticking out to you?
So currently there's tons of new keywords. They initially said they were trying to make the game simpler, and then we've actually seen 2 or 3 times as many relevant words. But,
there's actually a huge burden of knowledge now, in a way. There's this whole catalog of words you gotta learn now.
In the beta right now, they have many that you can just scroll over and it tells you what it does, even for simpler things. So they've added decay, which is the opposite of regeneration. So they put 2 decay on a unit, and they take that at the end of the turn, which is sort of a weaker version of upkeep damage. Black has a new mechanic called Scheme, where you put an effect on a unit with a spell, and then anytime your enemy passes, or if you pass, some of them are on you, then the effect goes off.
What
can be
unit, for
interesting.
example, has scheme?
There's a
Or
black
what
spell
card?
called 1,000 Cuts, and you enchant the enemy, and anytime they pass, they take 1 damage. And that adds permanent. Green has a new mechanic called Mulch, which looks really strong to me. When you cast it, you get a card. Is it a card or a spell? That's 1 lower cost. 1 or more lower cost. So, for instance, Corrosive Mist has Mulch on it, and so when you play it for 5 mana, you'll draw a card that's 1 to 4 mana.
Yeah, that
this
sounds
looks
nuts.
Very overpowered to me.
Yeah.
Changes. It's insane. But so Scheme is attached to black, and Mulch is attached to green.
What are my boys blue getting?
I don't know. I haven't. There isn't like a red and a blue equivalent that I've seen.
Oh.
Actually, something that blue is getting is revealing the cards of your enemy.
Right.
Like Pierpont and Imperia do that, and both Vanessa and Rubik can even steal or copy the spells in your opponent's hands and make them blue, so you can actually use them.
Also, there's this broken item called Gem of True Sight on 20 gold that reveals your opponent's hand at the start of the turn. And so you can just see all their cards except the one they draw. There's damage immunity, so like BKB sort of effect on some cards. But most effects are for the turn now instead of permanent. It'll specify if it's permanent, but otherwise the base is just... Devour is a mechanic, so some creeps have Devour, and when you place them on top of another body, they gain the stats that are underneath. So it's sort of like old Ravenous Mass.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Not many have that, but some of them do. And there's a challenge in the campaign where everything has the Devour mechanic, and so you have to build really big heroes because the opponent towers have like 250 health and armor or something. Pillager is a new black mechanic, so a Gloaty Pillager, for example, has it, and it's when you deal damage to your opponent's tower, it steals 2 gold from them. So if Pillager hits the tower, it takes 2 gold from them and gives it to you. And also a Gloaty has built-in do 2 tower damage, so it does a pillage when you play it, which is kind of obnoxious. This mechanic is also built into Redness Pillager. So if you get the Pillagers going, Pillager's kind of shitty without infinite lane sizes now.
Yeah.
But if you have 2 of them going, you steal 4 gold, 8 gold swing. It's kind of cute.
Yeah, that's not bad.
The other interesting one is repeatable. So some cards like Axe's
Culling
card,
Blade.
if you play it, Axes you can repeat, I think, any number of times in a turn.
Yeah.
There's a couple other cards that will be repeatable once, or there's not many of them yet. Ogre Magi's multicast has been changed that the first card you play every other turn in blue, it'll make a copy of that's repeatable. It's like fleeting, essentially. It makes a fleeting copy.
So it's like kind of like Echo or other mechanics in other card games.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty similar. That's most of them. There's like Root and Coup and stuff have been changed to Slay, or like Assassinate is just slay an enemy and it just kills it outright.
Makes sense. I have a question.
Go ahead.
In terms of kind of like news and timing and that sort of thing, what's do we have any information on when things are kind of like ramping up? Like when they're, is there going to be a certain point where there's like open beta?
The word they used is trickling out invites. So right now we're only a couple hundred testers in. Currently they are testing stability and usability, and then they're going to increase that. But for now, the word is that they will prioritize people who have bought the original game. We'll have to wait for open beta until like everyone who actually bought the original is in, apparently. And
signs up.
Yeah, and signs up. And only then we'll see where the beta goes. I believe they said they don't want this to go as long as the Dota 2 beta, but the
That
way
was like
that
4 years.
Yeah, that was a couple
I think
years.
it was a joke.
But it is likely that this will be longer than the Underlords beta, for example, which was
that's out of beta?
Yeah, Underlords. Have you heard of
A couple
that
months
game?
ago?
Have you heard? Yeah.
Huh.
I think the original blog post had like a 4-point timeline, and the first 10 weeks of posts corresponded to the first point here. The first point was testing stuff behind the scenes or getting it ready, and now we're into them on the beta phase, and then that's followed by open beta and then the game. So on that timeline, we're in within a couple months. But
Yeah.
They've been like communicating very openly and clearly about things, but they haven't said where the game is at or what their times are, because I think last time they committed to the game releasing on a date, and then we went from a month of beta to a week of beta.
Yeah, and then there was that $1 million tournament.
And then there wasn't a beta at all, and then they're like, this is the full game, so everybody got upset. So I see why if they knew, they would tell us, I think, and I think they just don't know. It's not straightforward.
Are there any other questions that you have about the game? Perhaps there's something that we forgot to mention that you're really wondering about.
Oh, man.
Take your time.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I'm just at the point where you guys are, where it's really hard to talk about without trying it out, you know? I'd love to, I'm sure when I get an invite, same as you guys, I'll mess around with it, and it'll be kind of fun, revisiting it. I'm not sure how long exactly I'll play it, but I'm looking forward to it. It'll be interesting,
What was the thing you liked the best about Artifact 1 that you really hope they keep in Artifact 2?
That's a good one. That's a very good one.
And you're not allowed to say the imps.
Are they getting rid of the imps?
They currently don't have
Probably
the
not.
imps.
Don't worry.
And,
Anger just hates the imps.
Oh yeah.
I still haven't seen the imps, so I'm hoping that.
I remember Anger was the champion of like the no imps mod.
Yeah.
I even made like a whole video where I went on a big rant about how I thought it was the reason for why people quit the game. I actually convinced myself it was making people exhausted.
Very clearly.
From the imps.
That's a difficult question. It really is. I don't know. I think that the reason why that question is so hard to answer is because old Artifacts never felt complete as a game. Right. It was something that felt like it had a ton of potential, and then they just it feels like they just launched it in a pretty incomplete form. It's sort of, in a way, just like kind of thinking about it, it never felt like there was anything that was tangibly there. There were a lot of things that I was very hopeful for and very much like looking forward to, but like in terms of stuff to lose, I don't know. I think one thing I really did like was the ability to play it in a very complex way. I guess I would say something akin to like a skill ceiling for at least some decks out there. Because obviously, I mean, don't get me wrong, I think they're making the game more accessible in a lot of ways, and I think that's good and in fact necessary. Mm-hmm. But there is I think a large part of the appeal of Artifact was, at the very least, it gave you a feeling that no other card game had in terms of certain positions that you felt challenged in, right? Like mono blue kind of stuff, where you really kind of felt like you had to be fucking 5-head. Am I allowed to swear? That's the second time I've done it. Should ask back.
Go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
Go ahead. It's not a clean podcast.
Thank fucking God. But basically, just that sort of that feeling Artifacts captured that no other card game really had, where it felt just like, you had like some extreme outplay ability. And obviously you can't let that sort of thing run rampant, because it was definitely part of the reason why some people didn't like the game in terms of like the pressure. But you can definitely have that not necessarily disappear completely too, I guess.
It'll be interesting to see what the skill ceiling looks like after we have the game and can play it for a while. Like it's not, to me, it seems like it's not initially apparent how, if there's a skill ceiling or not, like where it lies until you've played for a bit and things settle out a little. Yeah, it sure was hard to switch to other games after Artifact.
Right.
Yeah, there were definitely a few members of our community who were worried that Artifact, which was a very unique game, which tried to innovate, is now becoming something a little more middle of the road kind of thing.
Right.
The same thing that a lot of other card games are doing.
Yeah,
And so the
yeah.
hope is that we can have both.
I was talking with Grappler, and yeah, like he sort of like, I don't know. I mean, I got the impression that was the camp that he was into. It's like, you know, it's not, it might not be as like a, you know, huge brain anymore.
Yeah.
We'll see. Time will tell.
Yes, as we'll having access to the game and playing it.
Exactly.
We can't skirt around it forever. We just can't. We can't.
You know what? I promise you, once you are in the beta and we're going to invite you back on so we can have a more substantial discussion about everything.
That sounds
we
good.
will consider allowing you back on to give you a little bit of a little boost.
Yeah.
Cool. And if I get a key, we can just do some good old fashioned account sharing.
Nice.
In Minecraft.
Which is, of course, a joke since that is breaking TOS.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah. All right, then. I guess as we put our foot out the door, Swim, would you like to tell the people where they can find your stream?
They're better off. It's okay.
And Anger, where can people find your YouTube channel?
youtube.com/angermania.
Wonderful. And Kiwi, what are you streaming currently?
I swear, if one more person asks me if I'm in the beta yet, I'll.
Yeah, you would
I'll
be
be
streaming
out there
if you
soon.
did, right?
When I'm in, I will be streaming, and I'm at Twitch/Kiwi_streaming.
Wonderful. And I'm only on Twitter, I don't do shit, at Cymen90.
Oh, and our producer, Rami, on Twitter and Twitch at megaRammy.
Thank you so much for listening, everyone. And happy Pride Month.
Stay safe.
Peace.
Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you for your business. Come again.